You are not behind because you are weak. You are not failing because you are unlucky. You are not stuck because you are stupid. That explanation feels comforting, and that is exactly why it destroys people. The truth is heavier to carry but impossible to escape. Most people are losing because they are actively working against themselves every single day without realizing it. Not through dramatic mistakes or massive failures, but through small decisions that feel harmless in the moment. This is the brutal reality people avoid because it forces responsibility inward instead of outward. Human beings rarely fail because life is unfair. They fail because they ignore simple rules that feel too obvious to matter. And obvious rules are the most dangerous ones to break because they do not punish you immediately. When a rule feels simple, the mind treats it with disrespect. It assumes understanding is the same as execution. It assumes knowing is the same as doing. That assumption quietly ruins progress. Simple rules offend the ego because they remove excuses. If the solution is obvious, then the problem cannot be blamed on circumstances, timing, or other people. It can only be blamed on personal behavior. That realization is uncomfortable, so the mind avoids it. Overconfidence makes this avoidance easier. Overconfidence whispers that you already know this, that you will apply it later, that skipping it once will not matter. Negligence hides behind intelligence. You do not decide to sabotage your life. You just decide to delay what you already know needs to be done. You break a rule once and nothing bad happens. No alarm goes off. No punishment arrives, so your brain records the experience as safe. That is how self-inflicted loss begins. It is quiet, it is patient, it is invisible. Skip discipline for one day and nothing collapses. Ignore consistency for 1 week and nothing burns down. Choose comfort over effort once and life does not fall apart. But something internal shifts, a standard lowers, a boundary weakens, a pattern forms. Humans are wired to react to immediate danger, not slow decay. A sudden threat demands action. Gradual decline feels harmless. That is why negligence feels safe even when it is lethal. Small violations do not feel serious, so they repeat. Repetition turns behavior into identity. Identity determines outcomes. This is how years are lost without drama. This is why people wake up one day confused about how time disappeared. Discipline does not vanish overnight. Progress does not die in a single moment. It erodes through tolerated laziness, justified excuses, and postponed responsibility. People tell themselves they are trying when they are actually negotiating with their own standards. They call delay planning. They call avoidance rest. They call lowered expectations realism. Each choice feels reasonable alone. Together they create stagnation. Most people do not fail loudly. They fail quietly. They fail in ways that feel normal. That is what makes it dangerous. Self-betrayal never announces itself. It disguises itself as logic. It disguises itself as patience. It disguises itself as balance. The mind says you deserve a break. You will start tomorrow. This is not the right time. And every time you listen, the rule loses authority. Reality does not respond to intention. Reality responds to repetition. Knowing the rule does nothing. Obeying the rule changes everything. Consistency beats intensity. Discipline beats motivation. Repetition beats talent. Delayed gratification beats impulse. Everyone hears these principles. Very few respect them. Respect requires humility. It requires accepting that progress comes from boring obedience, not clever shortcuts. The ego hates boring obedience. It wants exceptions. It wants proof that you are different. But reality does not negotiate. It only compounds behavior. Small rule-breaking compounds the same way success does, silently and relentlessly. One ignored habit multiplies. One lowered standard makes the next easier. One excuse trains the brain to produce another. Eventually, the line disappears because it was crossed slowly. People spend years searching for motivation, consuming information, waiting for clarity, while breaking the same basic rules daily. They are not confused. They are undisciplined. They are not unlucky. They are negligent. They are not lost. They are avoiding responsibility. The most painful realization is not that you did not know better. It is that you did know better and chose comfort instead. Every time you ignore what you know you should do, you reinforce a pattern of delay, excuse, and decline. Patterns do not care about goals. They only care about repetition. By the end of this video, you will realize you have been breaking at least one simple rule that has been quietly stealing years of progress from you, not loudly, not dramatically, but efficiently. The brain does not ignore simple rules by accident. It ignores them by design. Your mind is not built to reward what is boring, repetitive, or familiar. It is built to chase comfort, shortcuts, and stimulation. This is why knowing the right thing to do has never been enough. The brain wants efficiency with minimum discomfort. Simple rules offer no excitement. They do not feel new. They do not feel clever. They do not trigger urgency. So the brain quietly deprioritizes them even when they are essential. This is not laziness. It is biology. The brain is a dopamine-driven machine. It prioritizes what feels rewarding now over what pays off later. Simple rules rarely produce immediate pleasure. Waking up on time does not create a rush. Repeating a boring habit does not feel impressive. Saying no to temptation does not feel satisfying in the moment. So the brain labels these actions as low value, even when they are high impact. When something does not stimulate dopamine, the brain treats it as optional. This is why simple rules are ignored while complex strategies feel attractive. Complexity feels intelligent. Complexity feels engaging. Complexity feels like progress, even when it produces none. The brain would rather think than act because thinking feels productive without requiring discomfort. This is how overthinking replaces execution. Planning releases dopamine. Consuming information releases dopamine. Talking about change releases dopamine. Actually doing the work often does not. So the brain chooses the path that feels good while convincing you it is still progress. This is where intelligence becomes a liability. Smart people are better at rationalizing inaction. They can build elegant explanations for why now is not the right time. They can analyze endlessly instead of committing. They can see 10 possible paths and walk none of them. Discipline does not require high intelligence. It requires tolerance for boredom and discomfort. Many intelligent people fail not because they lack understanding, but because they lack restraint. They trust their mind too much. They assume awareness equals control. It does not. Knowing the rule does not give it power. Obeying it does. The ego plays a central role in this process. The ego hates simplicity because simplicity implies that success is accessible to anyone willing to follow basic rules. That threatens the ego's need to feel special. So the ego creates exceptions. It whispers that you are different, that the rules apply to others who lack your insight, that you can afford to skip steps, that you will optimize later. This belief feels empowering but produces stagnation. The more intelligent you are, the more convincing these internal arguments become. Intelligence sharpens the knife you use against yourself. It allows you to justify delay with logic. It allows you to dress avoidance as strategy. It allows you to ignore fundamentals while chasing advanced techniques. Meanwhile, disciplined people win quietly. They do not think more. They repeat more. They do not search for perfect methods. They execute imperfect ones consistently. This is why disciplined people often outperform smarter people over time. They respect simple rules instead of questioning them. They do not negotiate with themselves daily. They do not wait for motivation. They move when it is boring. The brain resists this because repetition without novelty feels empty. There is no spike, no validation, no immediate feedback. So the brain looks elsewhere for stimulation. It scrolls. It plans. It distracts. It delays. And then it convinces you that you failed because circumstances were difficult. But that is not the truth. You did not fail because you lacked information. You failed because you ignored what you already knew. You knew consistency mattered, but you chose intensity once in a while. You knew discipline mattered, but you waited to feel motivated. You knew focus mattered, but you allowed distraction because it felt harmless. Each time the brain chose comfort, it strengthened that pathway. Neural pathways grow with use. The more you delay, the easier delay becomes. The more you avoid, the more avoidance feels natural. The brain adapts to the pattern you repeat, not the goals you claim. This is why habits feel automatic over time. The brain loves familiarity. Even destructive patterns feel safe when they are known. Breaking a rule once teaches the brain that breaking it is survivable. Breaking it again teaches the brain it is normal. Eventually, following the rule feels uncomfortable, while breaking it feels familiar. At that point, discipline feels unnatural even though it is necessary. This is how people become stuck while believing they are trying. They are exerting mental effort, but avoiding behavioral effort. They are thinking hard but acting little. They feel busy but remain stagnant. This creates internal frustration because deep down they know the truth. They know what they should be doing. That awareness becomes painful. To escape the pain, the brain produces more rationalizations. It blames timing. It blames energy. It blames external pressure. Anything except the simple reality that the rule was ignored. The most dangerous lie the brain tells is that small violations do not matter. The brain discounts slow damage because it cannot feel it immediately. There is no emotional feedback loop to warn you. So the behavior continues unchecked. Over time, the cost becomes massive, but by then it feels irreversible. People then label it bad luck or burnout or loss of passion. But the root was neurological conditioning through repeated neglect of simple rules. The emotional weight of this realization is heavy. You were not missing a secret. You were avoiding a responsibility. You were not confused. You were inconsistent. You were not incapable. You were undisciplined. This is not an insult. It is clarity, because clarity restores control. Once you understand that your brain is wired to dismiss what matters most, you stop trusting comfort as a signal. You stop waiting for excitement to act. You stop believing intelligence alone will save you. You realize that progress demands obedience to fundamentals even when the brain resists. You did not fail because you did not know. You failed because you ignored what you already knew. Most people do not fail because they lack ambition or potential. They fail because they ignore simple rules that quietly govern outcomes. These rules are not hidden. They are not advanced. They are not complicated. That is exactly why they are dismissed. Consistency beats intensity every time. Intensity feels powerful because it creates emotion. It feels like effort. It feels like progress. Consistency feels boring because it produces no dramatic moment. One intense burst of effort does not change a trajectory. Repeated moderate effort does. The brain loves intensity because it feels heroic. Reality rewards consistency because it compounds. People work hard for a short period, burn out, then stop. They repeat this cycle for years and call it trying. Meanwhile, the person who shows up daily with average effort keeps moving forward. Progress is built by repetition, not bursts. Protecting energy before chasing results is another rule most people violate. People focus on outcomes while neglecting the fuel required to reach them. They drain themselves mentally and physically, then wonder why execution feels heavy. Energy is not motivation, it is capacity. Without energy, discipline collapses. People say they lack time when they actually lack energy. They sacrifice rest, nutrition, and mental clarity for productivity, not realizing they are destroying the very thing productivity depends on. High output requires protected input. When energy is ignored, effort becomes inconsistent and frustration grows. Small expenses destroy big goals more than people are willing to admit. This rule applies beyond money. It applies to time, focus, and attention. Small leaks feel harmless, a little unnecessary spending, a little wasted time, a little distraction. None of it feels serious. Over time it erodes momentum. Big goals require accumulation. Accumulation fails when leaks are tolerated. People look for major breakthroughs while bleeding resources slowly. The damage is invisible at first, which is why it continues. By the time it becomes visible, the gap feels overwhelming. Sleep, health, and routine are non-negotiable whether people accept it or not. The body is not separate from performance. The mind does not operate independently of biology. Poor sleep weakens judgment. Poor health reduces resilience. No routine increases friction. People treat these as optional luxuries instead of foundations. They chase productivity hacks while neglecting basics. There is no mental toughness that compensates for chronic exhaustion. There is no mindset that overrides a neglected body. When these fundamentals are ignored, everything else becomes harder. Discipline matters more than motivation, even though motivation feels more powerful. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is structural. Motivation comes and goes. Discipline stays when feelings disappear. People wait to feel ready. Discipline moves regardless of mood. Motivation creates spikes. Discipline creates stability. Most people rely on motivation and then feel betrayed when it disappears. Discipline does not promise excitement. It promises progress. It works on days when nothing feels good. That is why it is rare and valuable. Avoiding discomfort creates future pain every single time. Discomfort is the price of growth. Avoidance delays the price but increases it. People avoid hard conversations, hard work, hard decisions, and hard routines. In the moment it feels like relief. In the long term it becomes pressure. Every avoided discomfort compounds into a larger problem. Short-term comfort trades places with long-term suffering. This trade is invisible until it is unavoidable. People then say life became hard, when in reality they postponed hardness until it became heavier. Compounding works both ways whether people acknowledge it or not. Good habits compound into strength. Bad habits compound into limitation. Neutral does not exist. Everything is either building or eroding. Small positive actions repeated daily create exponential results over time. Small negative actions repeated daily create exponential damage. The direction feels insignificant at first. Over time it defines everything. People underestimate compounding because it is slow. They overestimate short-term effort because it feels intense. This misunderstanding keeps people stuck. These rules are simple. That is why they are ignored. They do not flatter intelligence. They demand obedience. They do not offer shortcuts. They offer structure. Most people know these rules. Very few live by them. Knowing creates comfort. Obeying creates change. The reason this exposes people is because everyone can recognize where they have been careless. These rules reveal patterns people would rather avoid seeing. That discomfort is clarity. That clarity is power. It did not fail in one day, it failed slowly. That is how most damage happens in real life. Quietly, gradually, without drama. People imagine failure as a sudden collapse, a single bad decision, a clear moment where everything went wrong. Reality is far less dramatic and far more dangerous. Reality is neglect repeated until collapse becomes inevitable. Financial losses rarely come from one reckless move. They come from ignoring basic rules for years, spending a little more than planned, delaying saving until later, avoiding budgeting because it feels restrictive, trusting future income instead of present discipline. Each decision feels harmless. Each excuse feels logical. Over time, the margin disappears. Debt grows quietly. Stress builds silently. Opportunities vanish because there is no buffer. Then one unexpected expense arrives and everything breaks. People call it bad luck, but the truth is that the foundation was already cracked. Burnout follows the same pattern. People do not wake up exhausted overnight. They ignore sleep because work feels urgent. They ignore rest because hustle feels productive. They ignore boundaries because saying yes feels easier than saying no. The body sends signals: fatigue, irritability, loss of focus. These signals are dismissed as weakness. Excuses replace adjustment. Coffee replaces rest. Discipline is applied in the wrong direction. Push harder, sleep less, do more. Eventually the system collapses. Motivation dies. Energy disappears. Even simple tasks feel heavy. People say they lost passion. In reality, they violated basic biological rules until the cost became unbearable. Missed opportunities rarely look dramatic in the moment. They look like hesitation, overthinking, waiting for perfect timing, ignoring consistency. Someone has an idea but does not act because they want clarity first. Someone has a skill but does not practice because progress feels slow. Someone has a chance but does not commit because comfort feels safer. Time passes. Others move forward. Doors close quietly. One day the person looks back and realizes the opportunity did not disappear suddenly. It expired while they were thinking. Broken relationships do not end because of one argument. They end because of neglected basics: not listening, not showing up, not communicating honestly, choosing distraction over presence, choosing ego over accountability. Small moments of neglect accumulate. Resentment grows in silence. Distance increases without confrontation. People assume relationships will survive on history alone. They ignore maintenance. They excuse behavior. Eventually, trust erodes. When the relationship finally collapses, it feels sudden, but the truth is it was neglected for a long time. Repeated failures follow the same structure. Someone starts with intention. They begin strong. They break a simple rule. They skip consistency. They ignore routine. They rely on motivation. When progress slows, they justify. When results lag, they blame external factors. Each cycle ends the same way. They quit. Then they restart later with the same behavior. Over time, failure becomes familiar. Familiarity reduces urgency. The person stops believing in change. They say they tried everything. What they really tried was intensity without discipline. The structure is always the same, because it's simple. A basic rule exists. Neglect follows. Excuses are created to reduce discomfort. Collapse arrives eventually. The delay between neglect and collapse creates the illusion that the neglect was harmless. That illusion is what traps people. Financial stress creates tension at home. Burnout reduces patience. Missed opportunities create bitterness. Broken relationships damage confidence. Repeated failures erode self-trust. These consequences do not stay isolated. They bleed into every area of life. One neglected rule rarely stays contained. It spreads. People then feel overwhelmed because multiple areas are failing at once. They think everything went wrong. In reality, everything followed the same pattern: slow neglect, comfortable excuses, inevitable collapse. The most painful part is not the loss itself. It is the realization that it was preventable, that the warning signs were visible, that the basics were known. That action was delayed anyway. Regret does not come from ignorance. It comes from recognition, from seeing clearly what should have been done. Imagine where you would be today if you respected the basics consistently, if you protected energy instead of draining it, if you showed up daily instead of occasionally, if you saved steadily instead of hoping later, if you had uncomfortable conversations early instead of avoiding them, if you chose discipline when motivation disappeared. The gap between where you are and where you could be is not filled with secrets. It is filled with ignored fundamentals. Fear is not created by exaggeration. It is created by realism. The realism that life does not forgive repeated neglect. It simply waits. The cost always arrives eventually, not loudly, not suddenly, but completely. Most people never fix this because fixing it requires a level of honesty they are unwilling to tolerate. It requires admitting that the problem was never lack of opportunity, lack of information, or lack of potential. It requires admitting that the problem was behavior repeated daily. That realization threatens comfort, identity, and ego all at once. People say they want change, but what they actually want is relief. Relief without restructuring life. Relief without discipline. Relief without sacrifice. They want shortcuts, not systems. Shortcuts promise results without commitment. Systems demand consistency without excitement. Shortcuts flatter the ego. Systems humble it. That is why shortcuts are popular and systems are ignored. A system is boring. It removes drama. It replaces intensity with repetition. The human mind resists that because boredom feels like stagnation even when it is progress. Ego plays a central role in keeping people stuck. Ego does not want to hear that success comes from doing basic things well for a long time. Ego wants to believe intelligence, talent, or awareness should be enough. Ego wants to feel special. Boring discipline threatens that feeling. It implies that anyone willing to follow rules can win. That idea offends the ego, so it rejects it. Instead, people look for hacks, secrets, and optimizations. Society reinforces this behavior. Attention rewards novelty, not consistency. Social platforms glorify breakthroughs, not routines. People celebrate results but ignore the process that created them. This trains the brain to chase moments instead of habits. People want visible wins without invisible work. They want transformation without repetition. This is why most advice consumed is never applied. Knowledge feels productive. Learning feels like progress. Understanding feels empowering. Action feels uncomfortable. So people substitute action with consumption. They read, they watch, they listen, they agree. Then they return to the same behavior. Knowledge becomes a placebo. It reduces guilt without producing change. People confuse knowing what to do with doing it. This confusion is fatal. Awareness does not rewire behavior. Repetition does. Comfort is addictive. The brain is designed to preserve energy and avoid pain. Discipline feels like threat to comfort. It demands effort without immediate reward. Over time, the brain learns to avoid it. Complaining feels safer than changing. Complaining allows expression without responsibility. It creates connection without commitment. People bond over frustration. They rarely bond over discipline. Complaining reinforces identity. Discipline threatens it. Changing behavior means changing who you are. That is terrifying for most people. It is easier to repeat familiar mistakes than to become unfamiliar with yourself. Repeating mistakes feels predictable. You know how it ends. You know how to cope. Change introduces uncertainty. Even positive change feels unsafe because it disrupts identity. People would rather be disappointed in familiar ways than uncomfortable in new ones. This is why people stay stuck even when they understand the consequences. Pain that is known feels safer than pain that is unknown. Most people do not lack willpower. They lack willingness to sit with discomfort long enough for identity to shift. Discipline is not about force. It is about structure. Structure removes choice. It removes daily negotiation. Most people want freedom, but they misuse it. Too much choice creates avoidance. Systems reduce choice and increase consistency. People resist systems because systems expose inconsistency. They expose excuses. They expose gaps between intention and behavior. It is easier to blame circumstances than to submit to structure. Society amplifies this resistance. Stories of overnight success dominate. Slow progress is invisible. The grind is unmarketable. So people absorb a distorted view of reality. They believe something is wrong when results take time. They believe boredom means failure. They believe struggle means misalignment. These beliefs keep them hopping from method to method, never staying long enough to compound. People say they tried everything. They rarely tried one thing long enough. They want outcomes without identity change. But outcomes are downstream of identity. You cannot keep the same habits and expect a different future. That requires breaking loyalty to your current self. That is the real cost. Most people are loyal to their excuses, loyal to their routines, loyal to their comfort, even when it hurts them. Discipline threatens that loyalty. It demands choosing long-term respect over short-term relief. Most people choose relief. They choose distraction. They choose rationalization. They choose delay. They convince themselves tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next year. Then regret arrives quietly. The harsh truth is that most people are not unlucky. They are undisciplined. They are not overwhelmed. They are unstructured. They are not incapable. They are inconsistent. Winners separate themselves mentally by accepting boredom as the price of progress. They stop negotiating with themselves. They stop looking for motivation. They stop expecting excitement. They build systems that run regardless of mood. Losers wait to feel ready. They wait to feel inspired. They wait for clarity. That waiting never ends. Discipline is boring. That is why it works. Most people do not lose because life is hard. They lose because discipline is boring. Reversing most of your losses does not require a new personality, extreme talent, or dramatic reinvention. It requires obedience to basics you already understand but have not respected. Loss accumulates through neglected rules. Recovery begins the moment neglect stops. The first step is not motivation, it is identification. You must identify the single rule you ignore most consistently, not the one that sounds impressive, The one that hurts to admit. The rule you negotiate with daily. The rule you break casually. That rule is costing you more than all others combined. People fail by trying to fix everything at once. They feel overwhelmed and change nothing. Real transformation comes from fixing one rule at a time. One rule stabilized creates momentum. Momentum reduces resistance. Resistance is what drains willpower. When one rule becomes solid, it supports the next. This is how stability is built. Systems matter more than effort. Motivation is unreliable. It fluctuates with mood, energy, and circumstances. Systems operate regardless of how you feel. A system removes decision-making from behavior. When behavior becomes automatic, discipline becomes effortless. Most people rely on emotional states to act. That is why progress collapses under stress. Systems do not care about emotions. They execute regardless. Building systems means deciding once instead of deciding daily. It means setting rules that trigger action without debate. Wake time, work blocks, sleep boundaries, spending limits, training schedules. These are not preferences. They are structures. Structure removes chaos. Chaos drains energy. When rules are automatic, mental energy is preserved for execution instead of negotiation. Making rules automatic requires reducing friction. The brain avoids what feels heavy. Simplify the environment so following the rule becomes the easiest option. Prepare in advance, remove temptation, reduce choice. Design surroundings that support behavior. This is not weakness. It is intelligence applied correctly. Tracking basics daily creates awareness. Awareness prevents drift. People lose progress when they stop noticing small deviations. Tracking does not need complexity. It needs consistency. Sleep, movement, focus, spending, work completed. These basics reveal patterns quickly. Patterns show what is working and what is failing. Data removes emotional interpretation. It shows reality clearly. When basics are tracked, excuses lose power. The mindset shift is critical. Simple rules must be respected like laws, not suggestions. Laws are followed regardless of mood. Suggestions are followed only when convenient. Most people treat fundamentals as optional. That is why outcomes fluctuate. When basics are treated as laws, behavior stabilizes. Stability creates trust. Trust builds confidence. Confidence grows from reliability, not hype. Simple rules are not limitations. They are protection. They protect time from waste. They protect energy from drain. They protect focus from distraction. People fear structure because they associate it with restriction. In reality, structure creates freedom by removing chaos. Chaos consumes attention. Structure frees it. When basics are protected, progress accelerates quietly. The brain adapts to repetition. At first, discipline feels heavy. Then it becomes neutral. Eventually, it becomes identity. Identity is powerful because it removes resistance. You do not argue with what you believe you are. Fixing basics reshapes identity gradually. You become someone who shows up, someone who finishes, someone who respects rules. That identity produces consistent outcomes. Comebacks fail when people chase intensity instead of stability. They try to compensate for years of neglect with extreme effort. That effort collapses under pressure. Real recovery is calm. It is boring. It is steady. It focuses on reducing loss before increasing gain. Stop leaking first, then build. This is how 80% of damage is reversed. Not through doing more, but through wasting less. Not through motivation, but through structure. Not through talent, but through obedience. Respecting basics removes unnecessary friction. When friction drops, effort produces results again. Momentum returns, confidence rebuilds, clarity improves. People mistake this for luck. It is simply alignment with fundamentals. Your comeback does not require becoming extraordinary. It requires becoming consistent. It requires respecting simple rules daily without negotiation. It requires obedience to basics you already know. That obedience compounds faster than any shortcut ever will. You already know what to fix. That is the part no one wants to admit. There is no mystery left. There is no missing information. There is no secret still hidden from you. Deep down, you know exactly which basics you have been ignoring. You know which rule you keep negotiating with. You know which habit you keep postponing. You know which discipline you treat like a suggestion instead of a law. That awareness has always been there. You did not fail because you were unaware. You failed because you chose comfort over obedience. That choice feels small in the moment but massive in consequence. Ignoring basics does not punish you immediately. It waits. It lets time pass. It lets excuses feel reasonable. Then one day it hands you regret in full. Regret is not loud. It is heavy. It is the realization that you had enough time, enough knowledge, enough opportunity, and still let it slip. The cost of ignoring fundamentals is not stress or struggle. Those are temporary. The real cost is permanent regret, the kind that shows up when you look back and see how preventable the damage was. The kind that comes from knowing the rules never changed and the opportunity never disappeared. Only your discipline did. Most people think success is complex because accepting simplicity would force responsibility. If success were hidden, failure would feel justified. But success is not hidden. It is ignored. It sits in plain sight disguised as boring repetition. It asks for consistency instead of intensity. It asks for discipline instead of motivation. It asks for patience instead of shortcuts. That is why it is overlooked. The reward for following basics is not excitement. It is stability. It is calm progress. It is boring success. Boring success does not create dramatic stories. It does not look impressive on the outside. It does not give instant validation. But it compounds quietly into freedom, confidence, and control. People chase excitement and end up exhausted. They chase hacks and end up confused. They chase motivation and end up inconsistent. Meanwhile, boring success keeps building in the background. It protects energy. It protects time. It protects self-trust. It gives you a foundation that does not collapse under pressure. The rules never failed you. They worked exactly as designed. They rewarded obedience and punished neglect. The outcome you have today is not random. It is a reflection of what you repeated. Every skipped basic, every ignored boundary, every delayed discipline, every justified excuse, all of it accumulated. This is not meant to shame you. It is meant to wake you up. Because the same rules that created loss can reverse it. The same simplicity that was ignored can now be respected. The moment you stop arguing with fundamentals, life gets lighter. Not easier instantly, but clearer immediately. Clarity removes confusion. Confusion drains energy. When confusion disappears, effort finally produces results again. Fixing basics is not glamorous. That is why most people never do it. They would rather complain loudly than change quietly. Complaining creates connection without responsibility. Discipline creates results without applause. Most people choose the first. That choice separates outcomes over time. If this message feels uncomfortable, that discomfort is honesty. It means something landed. It means a truth you avoided is now visible. That is a gift if you use it. You do not need a new plan. You do not need more information. You do not need permission. You need obedience to what you already know. Fix the basics and 80% of your losses disappear. Not because life suddenly becomes fair, but because you stop fighting reality. Respect the rules like laws. Follow them when it feels boring. Follow them when no one notices. Follow them especially when motivation disappears. That is where the separation happens. That is where change becomes permanent. Success is not hidden. It is ignored. The rules did not fail you. You ignored them. Fix the basics and everything else becomes possible. Like this if this exposed a truth you were avoiding. Comment the rule you have been ignoring. Share this with someone who keeps repeating the same mistakes. Subscribe for mindset-shifting content that forces real change.